Good Tuesday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and thank you kindly for watching the Jerry and Jerry Show. It's great to be with you on a glorious, gorgeous, and crisp Tuesday morning. Less than 2 miles from Scott Stadium, less than 2 miles from where the Richmond Spiders will visit a football stadium that is looking for victories and a start to the season that is something that they can build upon. Virginia football hosts the Richmond Spiders, ladies and gentlemen, in less than 2 weeks here in Charlottesville, Virginia, and we have quite a bit to cover. That's a 6 o'clock kickoff on the 31st of August on the ACCN Network. We'll ask the question, who's going to be the starting quarterback? We'll ask the question, how improved is the offensive line? We'll ask the question, how do players on this roster play with edge and a little bit of anger to get Tony Elliott what he needs, some victories, and a sniff of a bowl berth. We'll talk Joe Harris retiring from the National Basketball Association. We'll talk Virginia's brass restricting access to the Hill. And how about the Crimson Tide of Alabama paying a general manager $825,000 per year? You heard me correctly. The GM position has now infiltrated college football. Judah Wickower, executive producer and director of the program. He's behind the camera. If you can go to the studio camera and Judah, wave your hands in the air like you just don't care to your fans right there.
He's the MVP.
He's the MVP. If he's the MVP, Hootie Ratcliffe is our Hall of Famer. In fact, he is a Hall of Famer, the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer. My friend, a little crisp in the air this Tuesday morning.
It was. It felt like football season. I know Tony Elliott is hoping that there's a few more hot days because he told us the other day he knows September is going to be hot at times, so he'd like to have a few more hot days for practice to get his team acclimated to that. They didn't get a lot of really hot days in training camp, I don't think. Maybe a few, but it's been a little cooler in August than usual.
Absolutely has. It's been cooler in August, but it's been sizzling hot under center with this quarterback position. Two guys that could start for a lot of programs. You got fantastic coverage on jerryratcliffe.com on a QB battle that is raging on, as you put it.
Well, we've been keeping close tabs on that because it's, the quarterback position has become so important. It always has been, but even more so today than ever before. And if you don't have a really good quarterback, it's almost like you don't have a chance. And Virginia has, I think, two pretty good quarterbacks. And, we wondered about how the competition was going to be before training camp started. And Tony Elliott told us it would be an open competition, and it has been. And those guys have been getting equal reps with the first and second team offenses throughout camp, and that continues through the end of this week where they're finishing up their evaluations of Anthony Calandria and Tony Musket for the job. I asked him yesterday, I said, I probably get asked this 30 times a week, when are you going to name your starting quarterback? And
I think I asked you 2 or 3 times a week myself.
Yeah, probably. And, he said, well, he wants to name a starter in time to give whoever it's going to be a week of preparation as starter for Richmond. So I suspect that he'll probably name a starter. We probably won't know it, but he'll probably let them know it and the team know it. I'm guessing Thursday or Friday of this week. And he'll probably announce it to the rest of the world on Tuesday at his game week press conference.
Viewers and listeners, if you have questions for the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer, anything ACC related, anything UVA related, put it on any social media you're watching upon, and I will relay those questions live on air. Calandria or Musket, Musket or Calandria, two very different styles of quarterback. Musket's got to prove to the world that he can stay healthy. Calandria's got to prove to the world that he could take care of the football. Calandria's got runway, a second year. Musket, his final season in college football, and maybe he goes into coaching. but professional football not in Muskett's future. Calandria, a little on the shorter side, but a guy who's capable of making plays in the pocket, outside the pocket, on the run. He just needs a little time to throw the rock around. Break down the competition for us, Hootie.
Yeah, well, I think you have a good finger on the whole thing. I'm guessing that they're probably going to go with Muskett because he's a proven commodity. He won the starting job last year, kept it throughout the season, even though he was injured twice. When he did play, he was usually pretty effective. Had some good numbers. Had a great game against North Carolina, upsetting then 10th ranked and undefeated Carolina. Threw for a ton of yards in that game and a couple of touchdowns, if not 3 touchdowns. But he was very good. He played hurt. He showed a lot of grit, even with a bum shoulder that needed surgery after the season. He wasn't afraid to run the ball and put his body at risk for the team, and he earned a lot of respect from his teammates. He and Calandria have a really good relationship. They've both built their bodies in the offseason, so maybe they can take a little bit more punishment. They both added strength and muscle and some weight. Calandria, of course, smashed all the freshman passing records, which nobody saw that coming. We saw in the spring game that he could throw the ball, but it's hard to really tell from a spring game because you're going up against your own defense, somebody that you face every day in practice. So to see him do it against other teams last year was very impressive. Again, we all know that he has that gunslinger mentality. It's sort of that Brett Favre flair, which got him in trouble at times. And he's
saw that against Maryland.
Yeah, he's a playmaker, and they've charted every play that these guys make in practice, and they analyze game film from practice to see who's making good decisions, who's accurate. Every move these guys make is under a magnifying glass because they want to make sure they get it right. They don't want to take that flair away from Calandria's game. They just want him to get it under control, but manage it better to where the risk reward doesn't turn out into be that much risk. And the report is that both guys have improved in that area and are making better decisions. So I think it'll be a tough decision, but I don't know. Who knows? We could end up seeing both guys play in the first game. He didn't rule that out. And, in fact, he's the one that brought it up. And then we asked him about it, and then he kind of shied away from it then. But some of that could be on whether the game is close or not. If it's close and one guy is effective, I don't see them making a change. But if it's not a close game, I think both quarterbacks will play. Who knows? They might play both quarterbacks anyway, just to get both guys some action in the first game.
I read on JerryRatcliffe.com, taking care of the football at the start of training camp was an issue. Offensive coordinator Des Kitchens even highlighted this to the media. Good Lord, he said, there was picks and turnovers all over the place. But then he said as camp progressed, the fellas took care of the football a little bit more.
Yeah.
I will say this: if Muskett is if Muskett's turnover prone, that really narrows the competition. Because Calandria does have more playmaking ability. Against a team like Richmond, just one man's opinion, talk show host's opinion, to get conversation going, you're a heavy favorite. You should win fairly big. Why not play both, give both of them live action, and see if you can have more data points to pull from as you head into the meat of the schedule?
I think that would be the case if that scenario does come about. And Virginia should win that game. There's no question about it in my mind. They've handled all the FCS teams that they've played for the most part, and it shouldn't. I'm not throwing shade on Richmond, but Virginia. I think Virginia should be pretty decent, and it shouldn't be a real close game. Although opening games, anything can happen because teams are. It's the first game. It's a little rust, a little jitters, etc. We see a lot of upsets the first couple of weeks of the season because some teams just aren't ready to play. But I don't think it'll be the case. But if it's not a close game, they should play both quarterbacks and give them both some time in live game action against another opponent. And I believe that'll happen. I agree with you.
Richmond Spiders, guys, 31st August, 6 p.m., ACC Network, Scott Stadium. Other storylines and trends you want to follow in this game? Clearly, offensive line under the microscope. Folks, don't talk offensive line unless the offensive line is bad. When the offensive line is not in the news cycle, the offensive line is performing well. It's almost like government. What do we want from our local government? Boring government, and in the background, government that we can expect to do consistent policy. Same thing with the offensive line.
Yeah, no question about it. And they're being very careful with any guys that are injured. Mikael Boley, the big left offensive tackle, showed up at practice yesterday. He wasn't wearing a boot for the first time in a couple of weeks. I think they'll bring him along slowly and gingerly. And Brian Stevens is, I think, back. He's been a little banged up too, and they just want to make sure they can get those guys healthy for the season. That they know what they can do, so they don't have to prove anything. It's just a matter of trying to get that offensive line healthy and in one piece for the season opener. And that's what you want. You want a healthy offensive line. They've been building some depth because some of those guys have missed time, and it's a good thing. You don't rotate offensive linemen nearly as much as you do defensive linemen, but it's good to have some experienced depth behind him in case somebody gets banged up in a game and has to come out.
This offensive line is going to have to open some holes from the running game.
Yeah.
If it's able to do that, the running game will take pressure off the quarterback play. I think Tony Elliott is a defensive guy, and he wants to control time of possession with the running game and win the game defensively and by running the rock here. What do you see with the rushing attack? What do you see with the tailbacks setting the stage early and really flexing their muscles against the Spiders?
Well, we keep asking about the running game, and all the coaches seem to be very positive about the strides they've made during the spring and the summer workouts, conditioning workouts, and here in training camp. I'm anxious to see Kobe Pace, and we've heard that he's running the ball well.
We haven't seen true Kobe Pace yet.
No, we really haven't.
We've seen flashes.
Yeah, and Keith Gaither's their offensive, their running back coach. He said he thought Kobe Pace was as good as any running back in the ACC, and talked about some of the success he had when he was the starting running back at Clemson. And he had some pretty good games down there before he got injured. And again, I agree with you. We haven't seen the true Kobe Pace yet. I'm anxious to see that guy. And they don't have the deepest running back room in the world in terms of experience. Xavier Brown has been banged up a lot in the program, but he's apparently back now and somewhat healthy. Jack Greasy, which I'm writing something about later today, has been impressive in training camp. He had a 34-yard touchdown run in the scrimmage Saturday, and he's getting a lot of the tough yards. And of course, he comes from great football heritage.
I'm going to say that.
And so, it's going to be interesting to see if this offensive line can do its job and if these backs can help them control the game, because if your offensive line and your running game does its job, your offense can do pretty much anything it wants to.
Renee Pettifer watching the program. She says she loves our shirts. Thank you, Renee.
Thanks, Renee.
Watching the program. She wants us to talk Kyle Guy basketball and March Madness. We'll certainly talk basketball on the Jerry and Jerry show. In particular, the Joe Harris retirement from the association goes down as one of the top three-point field goal shooting percentage marks in NBA history.
Yeah.
The marksman Joe Harris. First, we got to talk some football. Other comments coming in, put them in the feed. We'll relay them live on air. Tight end play is something we haven't covered much here. An escape valve for quarterbacks that may be behind shaky offensive lines. Time will tell. Talk to us about the tight ends.
Well, they're deeper there than they have been in a couple of years. It was good that they got Sackett Wood back for an extra season. I talked to him the other day. I'll be doing something on him. Lynchburger. He had decided last February he wanted to come back and give it another shot, and got an exemption from the NCAA. And he just gives them some more firepower at that position. They've got 3 or 4 guys there now, at least. Dakota Twitty, who used to be a wide receiver, has moved over to tight end.
Hootie's on point, man. You can tell he's been at training camp.
Oh yeah, and you know they have a transfer that came in as well. I think the fact, they're deep enough now there that they can play two or even 3 tight ends at the same time if they want to, which gives your offense a little more flexibility in what it can do. And talking to Tony Elliott a couple of weeks ago about having effective tight ends in his offense, what it does, and he said, well, if we have that guy who can line up on either side of the line and both receive and block.
And he likes that pro-style format.
Yes, he does.
I mean, the former
Des Kitchens does too.
Yeah, I mean, he ran a pro-style offense at Clemson. We've wondered aloud, is the pro-style offense the best setup for a Virginia football team that's not the deepest on every position? But if you can get a 2 tight end look, you're looking like a pro football team in a lot of ways with your lineup.
Yeah, and even if you got even if you're just playing 1 tight end and he can line up on either side, and he can block and receive, you don't have to change things as much. It gives you a little more flexibility in what you're doing, and that helps the receivers and everybody else. So I think the tight end's going to be a position of strength for the first time in a couple of years.
Position of strength for the first time since the Bronco era.
Yeah. Bronco brought in a couple of decent transfer tight ends, and one of which is in the NFL today. But that's something.
And it used to be tight end U here.
It did. For quite a while, there was a lot of good tight ends, led by, of course, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Heath Miller, now the football coach at St. Anne's Belfield.
Big money.
Interesting storyline, maybe some fodder for the media news cycle. Patrick Estes, one-time tight end at UVA football, more of a blocking tight end, played professional football in the National Football League, most notably with the San Francisco 49ers. You're a Niners fan, aren't you?
I am indeed.
As he converted from tight end to offensive line, Patrick Estes ran for sheriff here locally, did not win. Now the athletics director at the Covenant School, where Jonas Sanker played.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
He's the AD at the Covenant School, and Heath Miller is the football coach at St. Anne's Belfield Academy. 2 tight ends who I believe, if memory serves correct, played at the same time at UVA.
I think so.
Yeah, so right down the street from each other.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. Small world. Charlottesville gets its hooks in you as it did with you and me.
That's true.
And keeps us around here.
Yep.
This football team, we've talked offense. I've mentioned Sanker, mentioned the Covenant School, 7-on-7 kid from high school. Now looking like one of the best defensive players in the conference. Where you want to go with Sanker?
I mean, he's just been an amazing story. Like you said, 7-on-7 football. You don't see a lot of that in the state of Virginia, and he clearly was a standout at Covenant School, and you know, I would imagine it took a lot for him to get really noticed by a Division I school, even one in your own hometown, because I would imagine 7-on-7 doesn't get a whole lot of attention from college scouts, but he was able to overcome that. And then,
can you imagine him playing 7-on-7 football?
No, I can't. I really can't.
I mean, you're a man among boys.
Yeah, and he's been outstanding. He's one of the highest guys in the country on the draft board at that position. So, what an amazing story that would be. 7-on-7. I mean, I know it's big out in Texas and some other places, but not really that big a thing in the state of Virginia. So, what a story that would be, going from that to playing in the NFL.
Viewers and listeners, let us know your thoughts. Put them in the feed. We got comments coming in here. This is one that's come up on a previous show. You guys have said on previous shows, if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one quarterback. Now we're talking about two quarterbacks playing against Richmond. Please offer some insight here.
Well, some schools have made that work over time, and generally, most of the time, I don't think it's a good thing. And I don't know if he's talking about rotating quarterbacks or not. I've seen some people try to do that, and I don't think that ever works. But you will see some schools, even successful football schools, may use two quarterbacks in the same game just to get the other guy some experience, live action, in case they do need him, or in case the other guy stalls out and can't move the team. So I don't think we'll see a situation where there'll be rotating series or anything like that. But I think if the opportunity arises, I think both quarterbacks will see some action in that game. And certainly if it's a game that they're winning, I think it's probably not a bad idea, because you want everybody ready for one of the biggest games of the season the following week on the road at Wake Forest, where you're going to have to put up some points, most likely, to win, because Wake Forest,
they score.
even though they may be a little down this year. I'm not hearing a lot of great things out of Winston-Salem, but they've been one of the highest scoring teams in the ACC the last 3, 4, 5 years, and if it gets into a track meet down there for some reason, then Virginia's going to have somebody that can move the chains.
One of the viewers and listeners that watches the Jerry and Jerry show, Derek Jones, sends us emails from time to time about our shows. He highlighted on yesterday's show, he had no idea that that Sean Moore committed initially to Virginia Tech football. Wanted us to talk a little bit about that. If you haven't seen the Sean Moore interview that Hootie set up on the Jerry and Jerry show, it's on jerryratcliffe.com. Go to his website, watch the Sean Moore interview. What'd you make of that? Sean Moore committed to Virginia Tech.
Yeah, we're still getting tons of hits on that show on the website. So if you haven't seen it and you're a Virginia fan,
it's damn good.
Particularly from that era, you'll enjoy it. I think I had heard him tell that story once before. Then again, I've known him since 1980.
You've known him for a while.
5.
Yeah.
But if you look back on it, it's probably not that surprising that he did that, because he grew up in Martinsville, which isn't that far from Blacksburg. His family, I think he said, routinely went to Virginia Tech to watch football games.
Oh, he said he was at Virginia Tech every Saturday.
Pretty much every week growing up. So
he had a cousin that played there?
Yeah. And, Bill Dooley had some pretty good success at Virginia Tech when he was there. I've covered some of that myself. And, I could see at that time why that would be a lure to him. And Bill Dooley and Tom Fletcher, who Sean pointed out, I know Tom Fletcher, or knew Tom Fletcher very well. he and I have known each other since I've been in the business. He's followed my career, and I followed his, and he was a really good guy. I could see how those two would be effective recruiters to a young kid like Sean at that time. So the real story there was how Danny Wilmer and some of those other guys convinced him to decommit, which probably wasn't as big a thing back then. It was kind of a silent commit at that time. But it would be a much bigger deal today, obviously, with social media and everything, and all the emphasis put on recruiting. Back in those days, recruiting news wasn't. People were hungry for it, but they couldn't get it. When I first came to Charlottesville, I made that a priority. And our sports section was football and basketball recruiting, and it helped grow our readership tremendously.
You sent me, I work for this fine man at the Daily Progress. You sent me down to Phoebus. I sat on a couch with no springs that had a hole in one of the cushions in an office the size of my coat closet, sitting across from Bill D. To get 15 minutes with Antoine Womack, the punishing tailback, that team with Thomas Jones for a two-headed monster backfield. Antoine Womack was a tough cookie.
Yes, he was.
He was a tough cookie.
He's a big dude.
He's a big dude. I remember Antoine Womack driving around grounds, because I was a student at the time, in a very nice Cadillac around grounds. You didn't mess with Antoine Womack. Not on the corner, not around classrooms, not on the football field. I walked down the stairs one time of the Biltmore. Antoine Womack was coming up the stairs. I was coming down. It was a very narrow hallway. Mistakenly rubbed shoulders with Antoine Womack. Gave me a look that would kill. And I just scurried down the stairs like a schoolgirl or a scared rat running down the stairs right there. Antoine Womack, but it's to the point that you made with the recruiting at that time. It was people were starving for it. And outside of the Progress and maybe some Roanoke Times with Doug Dowdy, no one was really doing it.
No, nobody. And, that reminded me of, that was the reason that the one time I think that George Welsh and Joe Paterno had friction in their friendship, because, George had been on the same assistant coaching staff at Penn State. And then when Joe was elevated to head coach, and he made George his backfield coach, and they became godfathers of each other's children, incredibly tight families, great friends, until the Antoine Womack recruitment came up. And I think Womack actually committed to Penn State.
He did.
Danny Wilmer talked him out of it.
That's right.
And Paterno and whoever was, I can't remember the guy's name, but Paterno's assistant who recruited that area for Penn State accused Danny Wilmer and Virginia of cheating, turned him into the NCAA, and said that Virginia bought him a car. And Danny told me that the guy was full of baloney, and that Womack's preacher had gotten him a car, but but it wasn't a Cadillac.
Okay, because he was driving around in a navy blue Cadillac.
Where the Cadillac came from, I don't know. But anyways, that caused a lot of friction between George Welsh and Joe Paterno, and they finally made up and became friends. But that was an interesting sidelight during that recruitment.
Womack's career, again, flashes of brilliance, but I don't think perhaps lived up to the recruiting billing. Had a year where he was not with the football program, then returned to the football program after a year of hiatus.
I think he got hurt in his very first game at Wisconsin. I was up there for that game in the Al Groh era.
Then had a little discipline situation.
Yeah.
Then returned and was not,
He was not the next great UVA NFL running back.
Right.
Although he did play, I think.
He did play well
in the NFL.
He did play in the NFL as well.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get to this football team here. Special teams, Hootie. It's got to be better than last year.
Yeah, I think it will be, and they've rightly put a lot more emphasis on it in the off season. I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago, but I'm not sure. But anyways, Keith Gaither, who is also the special teams coordinator, is getting more help this year. Tony Elliott made it a thing for all the coaching staff pretty much to get involved in special teams. So every special team is getting tons of attention. And, some of the analysts and all those people who are now allowed, I think, to coach on the field are giving input now too. So those teams are getting heavily coached, and the players are making a point of pride to be on special teams. And Keith Gaither said, frankly, that during the offseason when Virginia's coaching staff visited various NFL staffs and to gain knowledge, et cetera, that a whole new world of special teams knowledge was opened up to him. He had never been a special teams coordinator before, or even coach, I don't think, until he came here. And so I guess he was kind of trying to drink out of a fire hose to absorb all that knowledge, because that's a lot of responsibility. You kickoff team, kickoff return team, punt team, extra point team, field goal team, etc.
Especially for a team looking for an identity, especially for a team with such slim margin of error.
Yeah, and so I think he said he learned some things from NFL special teams coaches he didn't even know existed. So I think it was a great education for him, and it should help in a lot of ways. And I know they've put a lot of emphasis on it. And Tony mentioned the other day, he said, we had 2 punts blocked last year, and I think they both led to touchdowns for the opponents in one-score ball games that were deciding factors. So, and they had some kickoff returns on them that were big plays and momentum changers too. So it's been a huge point of emphasis in training camp.
Football, guys, less than 2 weeks away. We talked quarterbacks, we talked the offensive line, we talked the tailbacks, we talked the tight ends, we talked defense, we talked special teams, we got to talk wide receiver, a significant position of strength, the wide receiving core.
It really is. And Des Kitchens told us that there's probably 7 or 8 guys, receivers, that he trusts to go in and play. And that's a big difference over last year when they had a lot of passing yards, but most of it was distributed and ball to 2 people, Malachi Fields and Malik Washington.
Yeah.
This year, I think it's going to be hard to find enough balls to go around all those guys, which is a great thing because, as we mentioned before, they kept waiting on that third receiver to emerge last year and take a little pressure off Washington and Fields. The guy never really emerged, and the tight ends really were ineffective. I think the tight ends made a total of 12 or 19 catches last year. That's nothing.
No.
That will be significantly changed this season. And you even have freshman Cam Courtney, who proved himself in the spring and is one of those 7 or 8 guys that definitely going to see action early on. That guy has unlimited potential, I think. So there's tons of people, tons of receivers that they're going to be able to go to, and that's a good thing for Muscat and Calandria.
This team, guys, has got to start strong. You've highlighted this on JerryRatcliffe.com and on the Jerry and Jerry Show. You make hay early in the schedule. Do you want to highlight other teams that you're going to be following in conference play, other teams to look out for, other teams on the schedule that are worth attention or make you nervous? I mean, there's a bunch on the back end.
Oh, the entire back end is just insane. I mean, we've all said that the first 6 games are winnable. Richmond, Wake Forest, Maryland, Coastal Carolina, Boston College, and Louisville. After that, the back end is you go to Clemson, I mean, that speaks for itself.
Clemson will be 35-point favorites at least.
Carolina comes here. Carolina's breaking in a new quarterback.
And Carolina doesn't historically play well here.
They've only won once or twice here since 1986.
Right.
So, Virginia has a lot of confidence against them. Then you go to Pitt, which we're not quite sure how good Pitt's going to be, but it is at Pitt.
It's a road game.
Virginia hasn't played well it used to be Heinz Field. I think they've changed the name of it now to something else. Then you go to Notre Dame. I mean, not many people win in South Bend, and Notre Dame's supposed to be pretty good this year. Then SMU comes to town.
SMU's got something to play for.
The Ponies.
I think the Ponies are going to be one of the surprises of the ACC.
I would agree, and it's going to be interesting to see how they negotiate a new conference themselves, playing in a different environment against teams they don't know anything about. And then you go to Blacksburg, and that, we all know the history there. They haven't won there since 1998. They've got to do some damage early on, and they should, because you've got Richmond, you got Wake Forest, who's picked in the lower echelon of the ACC. I don't think they're as loaded on offense as they have been. Maryland isn't picked very high in the Big Ten. Then you go to Coastal Carolina, and even though they've been dangerous, I think if Virginia takes care of business, I think they should be able to survive that. Then you got back-to-back home games against Boston College and Louisville, teams that Virginia should have beaten or could have beaten last year on the road, and you've got them both here. BC has a new coach in Bill O'Brien, the former NFL coach, and Louisville has had a lot of transition in personnel. They lost a lot of people, but they brought in a lot of new people through the transfer portal. So who knows what they're going to be like. But, you win 4 of those 6 at least, you've set yourself up for at least a chance to do something and build a little momentum toward the latter half of your schedule.
Football, guys, this team early in the season is going to be the key for the Virginia football team. We see the comments coming in here. Can Chris Tyree be the next Malik Washington? That's tough. I don't even want to put the pressure on it. How do we put the pressure on? I mean, can Chris Tyree, is Chris Tyree a better athlete than Malik Washington? Perhaps. Is he faster than Malik Washington? Yes. Yes, he is. But Malik Washington had one of the best pass catching years in college football history.
He truly did, and
with all the attention on him.
Yeah, it still amazes me to look back and try to figure out how he did that. And he was great at getting. He was always open. He was great at running routes and getting open, and he was so great in yards after the catch because, as we pointed out many times, even though he was a small guy, he was only 5'9". He ran like a running back. Well, Chris Tyree was a running back until he made most of the transition to wide receiver at Notre Dame last year. He didn't put up that kind of numbers. Of course, he didn't have to at Notre Dame, and he may not put up those kind of numbers. That was such a rare season that Malik Washington had.
We can make a legitimate argument that Chris Tyree not putting up those kind of numbers is best for Virginia football.
Yeah, because that means other guys are involved, and that's putting more pressure on the defense, and that's what Tony Elliott wants to do. It's great to have Tyree, who's a threat to take it to the house every time he lays his hands on the ball. And again, once he catches it, he knows what to do with it with his running back background. And, he's the kind of guy that can line up anywhere on the field. And I wouldn't be surprised if they put him in the backfield and let him have some touches. Certainly there's some jet sweep possibilities out of that as well. But he's going to be a dangerous weapon for Virginia. I don't expect him to have 101 catches or whatever it was that Malik had, which was just mind-blowing. But as you said, I think that's a good thing for Virginia. You don't want him to attract all the attention. You can use him as a decoy at times and help get the other guys involved.
Do you expect some kind of slash or athlete role for Tyree? Returning punts, returning kicks?
I think
slot,
he'll definitely return kickoffs.
Go routes, backfield?
Yeah, I think so. A guy like that, I think you'd be crazy not to give him as many touches as possible. Like I said, you may not want him to have that many catches, so you probably want him to touch the ball in other ways, getting runs in or returning kickoff. I think he'll definitely return kickoffs. He's fearless, and just talking to Malcolm Green the other day, he said, if you're on the opposing team's kickoff team, you're kicking it to a guy who has no fear. And you've probably never run into somebody that has his speed and his experience at returning kickoffs, and again, has no fear. And so he's dangerous. If he gets by that first guy, you're in jeopardy if you're on the kickoff team.
This football team, guys, has got talent on the roster. I've made the comment. Hootie's made the comment. Could go 4-1. You can go 5-0 to start. And anything could is the key word. I've gotten some emails from the viewers and listeners saying they're shocked that we're saying 4-1, 5-0. We're saying could.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not predicting that's going to happen, but
it's possible.
Certainly a possibility.
Yeah, possibility.
I think. Again, I think that's it's. People say, well, it's not fair to say this, that the biggest game of the season could be the second game of the season.
I think the biggest game of the season is the second game.
But it is.
Yeah.
And, that's a game you almost have to win if you want to be successful.
Yeah, I think I concur 100% with what you said. We want to talk Alabama. The news is on ESPN and the national outlets that it has a general manager position that is garnering $825,000 a year in pay. The Alabama Crimson Tide, of course, the creme de la creme. Courtney Morgan, a new precedent setting with a contract with the Crimson Tide. He was recruited by South Carolina. He's going to earn $825,000 annually, a 3-year contract. This guy comes to Alabama in a package deal with the head football coach from Washington, the 2024 national runner-up. Kalen DeBoer comes from Washington, brings his GM. The GM's role at Alabama is to help facilitate recruiting, optimize the program, and decision-making. Obviously, Virginia fans are wondering, does UVA have a general manager? Does UVA need a general manager? Is this the future of college football, this general manager position?
That's a good question, and I think it's something that college football is feeling out. There's several programs around the country that have hired GMs, and a couple that have had them for a couple of years. I'm kind of surprised that the salary's not higher than that, really, because some coordinators make double or even triple that for that kind of responsibility. I don't know how. I know how that was defined. I don't know how clearly defined or how much power a GM has in college football as opposed to the NFL. A general manager in NFL has tremendous power. I don't think that some of these GMs in the college game have that much clout. I think the head coach is still the head coach and runs the program. These guys are almost there to facilitate
optimizing the program.
Yeah, to optimize the program and help where help's needed. It's going to be interesting to see how this develops over time. I think a lot of people are in the wait-and-see mode to see if these things are effective or not. It may end up causing more problems than it does cures to some programs, and it could be some animosity between the head coach and the GM. Certainly there is in the NFL.
This won a package deal from Washington.
Yeah. I'm sure it came with DeBoer's blessing.
Yeah, DeBoer's blessing, right. You ever see a general manager position with UVA football?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't see it to that degree to where, they're described as a GM and helping have that much power in the near future, unless something goes amiss in the future or even near future. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this goes. I think there might be a team or two in the ACC that have general managers. I'm not sure, but it seems like I've read somewhere that somebody has one, if not a couple of teams. I think everybody's in the wait and see mode, but I don't know. It's a good question as to whether Virginia would consider doing that or not, or if they'll have their hand forced if a coach isn't being as effective as the AD would want them to be.
That's how I see it happening, is having their hands forced to have a general manager, and then this position, general manager, creates some insulation for the athletics director. Should the football team struggle, the general manager has to do the hiring and firing of the head coach, and if things don't go well, there's insulation for the AD with the general manager being the fall guy or the fall gal. That's like we see it with the National Football League, for example. I'm curious to see how it plays out, whether this new GM role not only does the recruiting, but the transfer portal and name, image, and likeness, as that becomes such a key part of college football. Time will tell. One thing that we're certainly following is this football team and some new policy that comes out of the athletics director's office. Single game ticket holders restricted access to the Hill. If you have a ticket for one football game, you cannot go on the Hill anymore at Scott Stadium.
That's interesting, and I think you said that the reason behind that was the Virginia Tech fans flooded the
it was the gateway
last year.
Yeah.
It's an interesting policy. I assume that the Hill is usually full of UVA students and high school kids and even elementary school kids, but you don't see that many adults usually on the Hill, I don't think. It'll be interesting to see how that works. If you're an adult, I don't know why you'd want to be on the Hill in the first place. It's a pretty wild, rowdy scene down there at times, but it's probably a good policy because I don't think there's going to be any opponents rushing the field at Virginia this year because usually most schools don't bring that many fans in the first place. So I don't know if it was necessary this year or not, but I guess it's policy that they'll keep for the future.
It's so when I've been attending football games at Scott Stadium all my life. Growing up, that's where my brother and I chose to watch much of the games. Certainly as students, we watched many of the games there with fraternity brothers and sorority sisters. Fans up in arms about this. One way to keep access to the Hill, win football games. Don't let Virginia Tech drop you by 38 points last game of the season and watch a third of Scott Stadium rush the field through the Hill and stomp on the 50-yard line.
Yeah,
win football games,
and that's got to at some point become a rivalry again. You can't let your in-state opponent dominate you like that, the way Virginia Tech has in this series. You just can't do that. You just can't. Very few places does that happen, and Virginia's got to make this. They got to show people that they can win in this series again.
Before we get to Joe Harris and the Kyle Guy topics that people want us to get to, any other golden nuggets, ACC-wise, that you want to highlight? We talked the Ponies of SMU being a team to watch. We know Virginia Tech is pretty loaded. They return a lot of talent. Florida State and Clemson looks like the top of the conference, the class of the league. Anything else you want to dot or cross?
A lot of people are really high on Miami because of their quarterback, but I'm still not totally sold that the Hurricanes are going to be as good as. I mean, every year they start out with these high expectations, and they never live up to them. It'll be interesting to see if how that goes. I'm sure there's a lot of pressure on that program because now that Florida State has turned its fortunes around, people in Miami are saying, why aren't we doing this? If Florida State can do it, why can't we do it? We used to be better than Florida State. So I think there's a lot of focus on what's going on Cristobal down there, whether he can get the job done.
Miami, always talent, but never the results and consistency that Hurricane fans would like.
I think there'll be some pressure on Mac Brown this year, too.
I think there's tremendous pressure on Mac Brown.
Yeah, I think there's
a handful of coaches that have some warm seats right now.
Yeah, I think there was some quiet action down there last year, and he was able to survive.
People pointing to him being out of touch with today's football. People pointing to age. People pointing to bowl berths and postseason results, despite having a boatload of professional talent on the roster.
Yeah, there's been high expectations down there, and I don't know if it was totally warranted or not. But
I mean, his last two starting quarterbacks are drafted high in the NFL.
Yeah, no question about it. He's had some good receivers and some great running backs. The defense has not been very good.
Right.
Throughout his second return to Chapel Hill, the offensive line has struggled, and that's been a big part of why the offense hasn't been quite as effective. But I think there's probably a lot of pressure on him this year to produce, and he's going to have to do it without the kind of quarterback he's been used to.
We'll close the Jerry and Jerry show with basketball. Joe Harris, 10-year career, retires from the NBA.
Yeah, we kind of saw that maybe coming because his playing time and everything
significantly
was really diminished
yeah.
This past year out at Detroit. I don't know. He's had some problems, I think, with his ankle or something the last couple of 2 or 3 years. I guess at some point you kind of wear down a little bit. He's been in the league for 10 years, which means he's going to get a nice NBA pension. But while he was in the league, especially with the Nets, was a tremendous three-point shooter. Retires as one of the top 4 or 5 three-point accuracy shooters in NBA history.
In history, folks.
Which is incredible if you stop and think about it. And you look at some of the other people on that list, and we all saw that when he won the three-point shooting contest, beat Steph Curry. I mean, that speaks for itself. What was that, 2019 or 20 when he did that? And was highly effective for the Brooklyn Nets for several seasons there. Somebody asked me about this in a radio show I was on somewhere in the state yesterday, if he might consider coming back and being on Virginia's coaching staff. I don't know. His dad was a coach, a successful high school coach out in Washington.
This was a key recruit for Tony Bennett when he transitioned from Washington to UVA.
Huge.
Bringing Joe Harris with him to Charlottesville showed Harris's commitment to Coach Bennett, his belief in Coach Bennett. And in a lot of ways, Joe Harris was a springboard to build on for Coach Bennett in a program that was the doormat of the conference in a lot of ways. What do you have, a 2-time All-ACC performer?
Yeah.
Joe Harris, an ACC tournament MVP.
Yep.
Regular season champion, tournament champion. Didn't he push them to, was it the Elite Eight where they lost to Michigan State, I believe, Joe Harris?
Yeah, in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah. This was as important a recruit for Coach Bennett as any he's brought to Charlottesville.
No question. I mean, he had to get things turned around, and he needed somebody that he could rely on to do it. And, I mean, Joe Harris was the perfect guy to come along. He was All-American kind of kid, All-American good looks, female
Yeah.
female population at UVA swooned over
Ladies
him
loved him.
for 4 years.
You're talking about the top prep player in Washington at the time.
Yeah, could shoot the eyes out of it. I mean, Tony recruited 7 guys in that class, and by the next year, 4 or 5 of them were gone. I think Joe and Akil Mitchell maybe were the only 2 that hung around.
And Akil Mitchell, Defensive Player of the Year, if memory serves.
Yeah, he sure was.
In the conference.
Akil, I spent the day with Akil and his family down in Charlotte, and before the summer before he came here, we were doing a special series on all those guys. We called them the 6-shooters, although they ended up adding a 7th. But Akil at that time thought he was going to be a high-scoring power forward or even a stretch 4, but his offense never really suited the college game, and he did something really intelligent. He focused on becoming a guy who could rebound and play defense and protect the rim, and it ended up giving him a chance to play in overseas for quite a while and make a career out of basketball. But, Joe Harris was the right guy at the right time, kind of like Sean Moore was the right guy at the right time for George Welsh in helping Virginia advance the program. They needed a guy like him. And one thing I liked about Joe Harris, who to this day is as good a guy as you'll ever run into. I mean, he's just a down-to-earth, really good guy. He took it upon himself to learn the history of Virginia basketball. He wasn't just a guy coming in here to play and get his diploma and move on. He really cared about Virginia basketball, and you could talk to him about Virginia's history, and he would reference to it himself. He knew about who all the great players were and the great coaches and what Virginia had done in its past. It meant something to him, and I think it still does.
Well said. Joe Harris, 10 years in the NBA, retired as one of the most accurate three-point shooters in league history.
And he could light it up. 36 points against Duke that one year.
I remember that.
Joey Buckets.
I remember that. Joey Buckets. That's right, the moniker. I'm very curious, as Hootie pointed out, the future of Joe Harris, and does it include coaching at all? Would love to see a roster with Tony Bennett of former star players. And
they're starting to load up.
They really are. I mean, was Isaiah Wilkins, was he a Defensive Player of the Year?
Yeah.
He's the Defensive Player of the Year. Kyle Guy
was the MVP of the Final Four.
MVP of the Final Four, All-American.
All-American,
yeah.
All-ACC.
Yeah, All-ACC. So time will tell. Follow that.
Of course, we got
Jay Willie.
Jay Willie, who was the glue
The
man.
glue guy.
Yeah.
Of a deep turning run.
Final 8.
Yeah. Could have been close to Final Four.
Very close.
Yeah, very close. Hootie Ratcliffe, the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer. What do you have in the hopper at jerryratcliffe.com?
Tons of football.
I know. You're loaded right now, aren't you?
I've got so many player interviews. I could write 2 a day for the next 2 weeks and still not get them all done. So there'll be a lot of player features scattered out over the next 2 weeks. Hope to catch up with Laura Coughlin, Virginia's 31-year-old sudden superstar on the LPGA Tour. She's won 2 of her last 3 events.
This is the Scottish Open?
She's won the Women's Scottish Open. She has 6 top 10 finishes on the LPGA Tour this year. She's really become a great putter.
Virginia golf is
She comes back to Charlottesville and works with First Tee kids every year. So she has a real affinity for Charlottesville. Her husband, John Pond, played football at Virginia. We'll be doing that. We'll be keeping our eye on the recruiting, basketball recruiting. Got another guy yesterday listed Virginia among his final 9. He's going to visit here September 28th. J.J. Mandaquit, point guard, one of the top 6 point guards in the country. Honolulu kid playing in Utah. So we'll be looking at it all, keeping track of the fall sports, but a heavy emphasis on football.
I love it. JerryRatcliffe.com. I'll say it again, JerryRatcliffe.com for anything UVA athletic related. The show is archived wherever you get your podcasting and social media content. Check it out on jerryratcliffe.com. Judah Wickower, the glue man behind the camera, RJ Willie, Judah Wickower. My name is Jerry Miller, and this is the Jerry and Jerry Show. Ladies and gentlemen, 11 days from the start of college football here in Charlottesville. So long, everybody.